Welcome to the deep dive. So, you shared a stack of sources that throws us right into the dizzying speed of the United States during the first half of the 19th century.
It really does. I mean, it's an era defined by this incredible geographic explosion, machine-driven economies, and the birth of, well, of truly modern, if messy, politics.
It feels like the country went from a fragile coastal experiment to this aggressive continental power almost overnight.
It does. And our mission today really is to cut through that simple historical timeline and understand the process of the change. We're looking for the key inflection points where technology, politics, and these massive social movements all collided.
And that, set up the fundamental tensions that would define America for the next century.
Exactly.
So we have to start with the velocity. The entire engine of change for this period is industrialism. Okay, so let's unpack this a little.
Sure. At its core, industrialism is it's the replacement of hand tools used by skilled laborers with power-driven machines. And these machines are run by semi-skilled or even unskilled workers.
And while this shift began in England, the sources make it pretty clear that in the U.S., one man, Eli Whitney, he kind of crystallized the whole concept with two, well, really contradictory innovations.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because his two major contributions pulled the country in completely opposite directions. The first, of course, is the cotton gin, invented in 1793.
Before this, separating the cotton fiber from the seeds was just painstakingly slow.
Painstakingly slow. And the sources show the gin's immediate impact was just huge. It rapidly automated the task, and that drastically cut the cost of processing cotton.
Which made the crop exponentially more profitable.
Right.
And this profit factor is so crucial because it creates one of the most brutal paradoxes in American history. An invention that's supposed to increase efficiency. It actually deepens the reliance on human bondage.
It does. The sources note that to maximize returns on this suddenly valuable cash crop, unskilled and slave laborers were often put to work running the gins.
So the efficiency of the gin just meant planters needed vast fields of cotton to feed the demand.
Which means you need more enslaved labor for planting and harvesting, not less. It drove slavery's geographic expansion throughout the entire South and West.
It's a perfect example of how rapid technological change doesn't necessarily dismantle existing structures, does it?
No, it can violently reinforce them if the economic incentives align. Now, you contrast that with Whitney's second defining contribution, the development of interchangeable parts.
Right. Before this innovation, we're in the artisan age, if you bought a musket, every single screw, every spring, it was handmade and unique.
So if one tiny piece broke,
You had to throw the whole thing out. A replacement part just wouldn't fit.
exactly. Whitney addressed this fundamental flaw by developing a system to produce parts that were identical. He used specific measurement gauges, templates.
And he proved this concept first with muskets for the U.S. Army.
He did. If the trigger on one rifle broke, you just grab a replacement trigger from the shelf and it fits perfectly into any other rifle of that model.
So the skill itself is shifting.
Yeah.
It's moving from the hands of the individual artisan to the standardized design of the production system.
And that shift is enormous. It means that to build or fix something, you no longer need years of apprenticeship. Interchangeable parts made mass production possible.
Allowing semi-skilled workers to assemble and maintain these complex products. It's really the foundational principle of the modern factory floor.
And that standardizing force, that ability to produce things quickly, reliably, and cheaply, is absolutely necessary when you look at how fast the nation itself was expanding geographically.
It is hard to imagine that kind of industrial growth happening in a static landscape. So let's talk about that, how the nation itself responded. Between 1800 and 1860, the U.S. more than doubled in size.
Yeah, from 16 to 33 states.
It's incredible.
And this expansion wasn't just movement, it was a deeply ideological and, an economic conquest.
Yeah.
The sources define three primary drivers for it. First, the fundamental, almost spiritual desire of Americans to own their own land. And second, the obvious lure of instant wealth from gold and other resources discovered out west.
And the third driver, that's the one that ties those personal desires to a national political justification, manifest destiny.
Yes. And we're not just talking about the literal translation here. This was a political engine. It synthesized individual economic greed with these deeply rooted beliefs about racial and cultural superiority.
So it was a popular conviction that the U.S. was what obviously and divinely fated to stretch across the continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
It provided the moral cover for what was, at the end of the day, aggressive and often brutal expansionism. The sources really emphasize that while this idea sounded patriotic, it was fueled by powerful economic ambitions.
And, critically, by racist beliefs that viewed Native Americans and Mexicans as just obstacles to this obvious fate.
It was the perfect political tool to mobilize voters and justify military action.
So a massive, geographically aggressive, and rapidly industrializing country, it requires a political structure that's robust enough to handle all that change. And that brings us to Jacksonian democracy.
Precisely. The political response to all this velocity was a desire for greater centralized control, but paired with wider popular appeal. Andrew Jackson and his supporters, they sought to create a fundamentally stronger, more dynamic presidency.
Often at the expense of congressional power.
Oh, right.
Very much so. And their core promise was expanding access for the common man. Jacksonian democracy actively broadened suffrage voting rights to include all adult white males, which moved past that traditional requirement of being a landowner to vote.
It did, and that felt like a genuine democratization to a lot of people. But here's where the political strategy gets really complex.
Okay.
While they broadened the voter base, the common man, they also tried to consolidate power by implementing the controversial spoils system.
Which was the belief that politicians should just appoint their followers to government jobs, essentially rewarding loyalty over merit. But wait, didn't the spoils system just create a new elite class, one loyal only to Jackson and his party? I mean, doesn't that undermine the stated goal of a true, transparent democracy?
That's the tension right there. It was defended as a way of limiting the power of the old, established elite families, the so-called Washington insiders, who had dominated government for decades.
So the argument was that rotating appointments democratized the process by letting more people participate.
That was the argument. But, as you point out, the practical effect was that it created a highly partisan, deeply loyal bureaucracy, which served the executive branch first and foremost.
And you couldn't just be a spectator during this period.
Yeah.
The rough and tumble nature of their campaigns pulled the average person into politics like never before. The sources paint a picture of a really personalized, often vicious, political culture.
Oh, the gloves came entirely off. Jackson's campaigns were characterized by these highly specific, aggressive accusations. His opponent was accused of everything from wasting public funds to flattering European royalty.
And Jackson himself was targeted. He was publicly accused of unfaithfulness in his marriage, dueling, massacring Native Americans.
Illegally executing soldiers, yeah.
Yeah.
And these weren't just whispered rumors, they were advertised everywhere.
This era really birthed modern campaigning. I mean, think about it. Personalized attack songs, cheap pamphlets and posters, lapel buttons.
And the first ever campaign rallies and massive public barbecues, the sources show this was the moment politics moved from, the reserved drawing room debate to this boisterous, often shocking public spectacle.
And all designed to mobilize every single one of those new voters.
That level of political intensity, combined with all the economic upheavals, it forced Americans to look at their society and start demanding moral correction. The friction was just too great to ignore.
Which is why we see the emergence of these powerful reform movements.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start with the one that reached deep into daily life. Temperance.
Right. The issue was that people consumed immense amounts of alcohol, leading to all sorts of social and domestic problems. So the movement demanded people either drink less or that alcohol be outlawed entirely.
And the impact was significant, wasn't it?
It was. It greatly increased the size and influence of Protestant religious organizations, especially in the growing Western and rural areas. And crucially, because women often bore the brunt of alcohol abuse at home, their visible participation gave them their first real opportunity for public organization and influence.
And that organizational structure, that carried over directly into the most divisive movement of the era, abolition.
The demand was simple and unyielding. Slavery must be abolished entirely and not allowed to expand into any new states or territories.
And this movement, it just made the expansion of slavery the absolute central political issue of the time, fracturing the nation.
Completely. And just like temperance, the abolitionist cause required women to speak publicly and organize. This work forced them to confront their own subordinate legal and social status.
It's like they realized, we're fighting for the freedom of others, but we ourselves are not full citizens.
Right. That sense of shared injustice helped accelerate the women's suffrage movement. But before we get there, we have to touch on the public school movement. That was a massive restructuring effort.
Absolutely. Driven by figures like Horace Mann, the issue was establishing education as a universal right. The goal was to require all children to attend free, taxpayer-supported schools.
And staffed by trained, often female, teachers. This established education as a mandatory state and local issue and was instrumental in improving the quality of instruction.
Okay, so connecting back to the women organizing for abolition and temperance. In the early 19th century, women had incredibly few rights. They couldn't vote, and in many states they lacked legal custody of their own children.
Or control over their own wages. And then you have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, an outspoken advocate who focused on demanding full citizenship, including voting rights and parental control.
She recognized that without political power, all the other reforms were just
Yeah.
temporary.
Precisely. And that focus led directly to the 1848 Seneca Falls Conference in New York. The sources really define this as the foundational event for organized women's civil rights efforts in the U.S.
Where delegates adopted a Declaration of Sentiments modeled directly on the Declaration of Independence, which explicitly demanded women's suffrage.
So if we synthesize all of this, the relentless geographic expansion, the industrial power, these political and social beliefs, we can start to define American nationalism during this era.
It was this collective belief that their nation was not just different, but actively superior to all others. And this belief was rooted in what they saw as their shared culture.
A perceived superiority based on shared components. A dominant Protestant religion, the English language, a common Northern European ancestry, and the cultural norms that flowed from all of that.
And this belief created a powerful sense of national duty. They felt it was their divine and cultural obligation to expand the hold of their religion, their language, and their culture all the way to the Pacific.
Essentially remaking North America in the image of the Atlantic coast. This complex of expansion, industry, and cultural pride is what propelled the U.S. toward its inevitable internal conflicts.
So what does this all mean then? We've seen this powerful convergence. You have rapid industrialization, which paradoxically reinforced a horrific social structure like slavery.
Right, and at the same time, political reform like Jacksonian democracy broadened voter participation, but also introduced this aggressive, partisan power consolidation through the spoils system.
And the result was intense social friction that could only be managed by the rise of these organized movements demanding moral accountability.
It's the perfect lens for understanding the lead up to the Civil War.
Yeah. I mean, we went from handmade parts to mass production, from a small republic to a continental power, all while social morality was being pulled in violently opposing directions.
So we've established that the Jacksonians favored manifest destiny, that aggressive expansion of American superiority. As a final thought for you to consider, when that extremely personalized, often vicious political culture met the growing moral fervor of the abolition movement, what specific internal conflicts or accusations might arise?
When an expansionist Jacksonian politician had to defend the institution of slavery while also claiming to represent the common man and uphold American destiny.
That clash of expansion and morality defined their political future, and it is absolutely worth exploring.